Poštovani gledatelji i slušatelji UNIDU radija, UNIDU televizije, dobrodošli u još jedno izdanje DU-CHECK podcasta. Bavimo se dezinformacijama u medijima, bavimo se porukama koje se odašilju u medije, isto tako u raznim kampanjama koje su svugdje oko nas. Današnji podcast će imati svoju posebnost, on će biti na engleskom jeziku. Dr. Benjamin Johnson je sa nama u studiju i ja mu želim ovim putem izraziti dobrodošlicu. I'm welcoming you in the TV show and thank you so much to be here with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today.
I told our listeners and our audience in front of the TV or internet, YouTube and other channels that we will talk about messages, we will talk about campaigns, about internet, about all the things that we already had experience during the DU-CHECK podcast in the previous shows. Mm-hmm. So your expertise and your knowledge about the messages and how the people react about it will be a lot of help for us. Also as professionals in our own part of media or public relations, politics, whatever, and also for our listeners and watchers. And I know that you had a lot of experience about the messages. And if we can just start from that small point, just one word, message, because we are also doing right now one kind of message to the audience. How you are looking and thinking about the message?
I will try to do it in one word for myself, and that's choice.
Choice.
So the thing that I really like to study in terms of how people use media, are influenced by media, is choice. How people make choices about the media that they consume, come into contact with, make also choices about sharing media with other people. So I think that's an important part of the media environment, the control that people have. And it's not perfect control. It's certainly, we have limited choices sometimes, or, there are social influences, but people have some level of personal choice that they can exercise in terms of how they want to spend their time with media.
When I'm thinking about choices, sometimes I can realize that during my childhood, my adulthood, whatever, in between, we were limited in one way or another.
Yes.
We didn't have so much choices like today. And I can also relate to this, that if we have some limits, sometimes it's easier to choose and to find specific things for you and for me and whoever is looking for something on internet or in a library or wherever else in like normal newspapers. Do you think that the new generations with those opportunities that are coming in front of them will have hard times to find specific, direct informations and precise informations that can help them during their life and also professional levels?
Certainly, in a lot of different ways. So one is, you mentioned, it can be difficult to make choices, especially if there are a lot of options. So there's some research from psychology and marketing that talks about the paradox of choice. If we have too many options, it can be paralyzing. We can not know which way to go. We have lots of good options. Or how do I choose this film over this film? And I think we often experience this when we go into an environment like Netflix or Hulu, where there are so many titles. You browse for a long time and maybe there's no perfect option that's like, oh, I really want to watch this film. I really want to begin this TV series. But maybe there are 30 that are good, 30 that are, how do you choose? So that can be overwhelming in terms of having maybe too many choices. People can, waste time trying to exercise their choice or come to a conclusion. But also the fact that there is so much choice, there is so much more media content now, that does create interesting situations for young people and for what kinds of information people come into contact with. So people may not have exposure to information that they need. So if you maybe are not particularly interested in news, it's very easy to avoid news now. There are other options. You can tune out the news, and that can create problems for democracy, for civic engagement, if people choose to avoid things that are important. We want people to have freedom of choice and pursue things that they're interested in, but we also want to have consensus, in our societies, and we want to have shared information and sort of a shared knowledge base, and that can be challenging if there are not shared cultural experiences or shared basis of knowledge.
When we talk about the new generations that will come, I read, I'm not sure, was it this morning early in my waking stage or last night, but I saw one article on Facebook that somebody shared that so much young people of, I don't know, Generation Z or what's the name, not to make a mistake, but that there's so big percentage of them never in their life answer the call on the mobile phone because it's too stressful for them. Mm-hmm. They choose just to communicate with like memes, with the small short messages, with some pictures, with stickers, with and that's also something that prepared me for our talk, because for me it's really crazy how the world has changed, because I can relate that all of those messages that we see online are building up so many emotions in us. Mm-hmm. I feel like during the Instagram or Facebook scrolling up and down or just reading articles in some digital media online, that in every article there is so much emotions, but I feel like they are placed there, that they are not real. They are just like a small clickbait or some focused advertising message that is coming to me or everybody else. Do you think that I might be mistaken, or it's happening?
I think you ask a lot of good questions there. So I think maybe like the last thing you mentioned is small emotions, or maybe like superficial emotions. So it's very easy to like something, or to give something some love, or be shocked at something. That's easy, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know that having like small superficial emotions makes it impossible for us to have deeper emotions, because we've all also probably had the experience of finding things online, whether it's a funny meme or like a very sad story that gave us deep, profound emotions as well. So I think we can have both. And I think it's always useful to compare the experiences that we have in media, or even new media, to experiences we would have had in other media or face-to-face. So, if we can interact face-to-face, like the very old-fashioned, very traditional, like the standard of communicating interpersonally, we can also have little likes and sort of small emotions there, right? We can have our superficial kind of niceties, politeness, etiquette that is important for the social situation. You walk into a room of people, it's important to make eye contact, or you don't know someone but you say good afternoon, like, so, and maybe that's the same as like these little tiny almost kind of meaningless emotions that we do online, these expressions of endorsement. So I think it's just it's a form of social engagement, and not all social engagement can be deep and meaningful. Some of it has to be fast and sort of politeness. So I think that's okay. In terms of the phone, that's so interesting. I think we have to think about, is that an important skill that we want people to be able to have communication just voice only? Because I was thinking of, like, maybe younger people haven't had that experience, or it makes them anxious, but what are some experiences that previous generations didn't have, or that would make them anxious? So would it make us anxious to send a telegram or to write a letter? And I remember, like, as a child, I would, my parents would have me like, write a letter to your grandmother or to a friend, a pen pal, right? And you would write it by hand. And maybe that was stressful because we would make a mistake in our handwriting. And so maybe it was an old-fashioned type of communication that my parents wanted me to do. And so I wonder, but why is it important? There are reasons why it's important to be able to write something by hand. Certainly there are probably good reasons why it's important to be able to have a phone call. But what are the specific skills that we want people to have? Is it just because we thought that phones were important and we want people to keep that, or there's something special or valuable that we want them to retain, the specific skill that comes along with it? Is it the waiting for the phone to ring? Is it the listening that's important? if we're communicating on Zoom or Instagram or face-to-face, we have all kinds of visual cues. But if we're communicating over the phone, we just have to listen very carefully.
Yeah. Something that you said at the early start of the answer of my question was culturally.
Yeah.
And that just placed a small thought for me. You're right now in Croatia, and I believe that you travel a lot around the world and you meet different people, different cultures, different countries, and they're all traditional things and also some modern things. Do you see that's a way of communication and placing messages and in person talking are different from culture to culture? Because when we think, let's say, about the people in Japan or China, we always have thought, I've never been there, so I don't know, but we always talk about the differences in cultural aspect and different messages and different emotions and what is okay to say in person, how to react, how maybe it is normal for us just to hug, to kiss somebody in Italy or Croatia, and somewhere else it's strictly forbidden. How do you see that sending messages around the world?
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important for people to encounter other ways of communicating, encounter other cultures, whether that's, having the privilege of being able to travel and go places in person and meet people, or one thing that I love to do is go to academic conferences and meet colleagues from all over the world, and we converge in one location for a week, and I get to meet lots of people and maybe go visit where they're from and they come visit me in the US. But that's really important, but we can also learn a lot about other cultures through media, so it can be a fast, efficient way of learning about remote culture by watching a film that is an authentic, at least, depiction of another culture, a film or television series made in another culture. I think that's very valuable because there are differences that I think we learn about ourselves, we learn about our assumptions when we see how other people communicate. So I spent 4 years working in the Netherlands, teaching at VU Amsterdam, the Vrije Universiteit of Amsterdam, and I was earlier talking about Americans, or I was talking about politeness and like little social emotions, and like Americans are very, well, maybe you say good at that, but Americans do a lot of it, lots of small social niceties, and that's not universal. So like an American will say, "How are you doing?" And that doesn't really, that's just like a nice thing to say, versus if you ask someone how they're doing in the Netherlands, like that means you really want to know. And so I would say that to students, like, "Oh, how are you?" Like, does he really want to know? Like, well, yes, sure, but that wasn't necessarily the purpose of asking. I had learned in my culture that I'm always supposed to say that, whether I want to know or not. And they had learned that you should only ask that if you really want the answer.
But I can relate to that because I had some experiences working with American colleagues, and because of the different time zones, we used to work like I was wake at 3 or 4 in the morning just to catch up with the middle of the day with my colleagues, but it was always nice to have that kind of cheered up people that were like, "How are you?" And I was like, "I'm sleeping, but thank you for asking. It makes me feel good, at least."
We'll keep you awake.
But that was really nice. You told me a little bit about the TV, the media, the movie industry, and we all grew up like on American movies, American superheroes, American TV shows, comedies, and everything, and it shaped me and all the people around. And we are blessed in Croatia that we never had like TV shows or movies that were like replaced with our own native language speakers.
The
because
dubbing versus subtitles.
I think in Czech Republic, in Hungary, in Italy, maybe also some other countries, it's like normal to replace their own native speaker with all the English native language speakers and actors' voices. And for us, we grew up with English, with original, like normal sound.
And Croatian subtitles?
Yeah, just Croatian subtitles. And for us, it shaped us a lot. We all learned to speak and to read English in early childhood. So for us, it's we are feeling very close to that. And I never had a chance to be like in the middle of that whole, let's say, American lifestyle, American feeling. And can you tell me a little bit about that? How you are feeling about that industry, about that great like music industry, TV industry? When we talk about Netflix, about Hulu, about all HBO, for us, sometimes it feels like something so far away, and we are having like a small insight of that. And when we are talking about Apple or other big companies, we have like just a small percentage of all the things that are available, let's say, in America and Canada, like Apple TV and iTunes. It's all very slowly coming to European Union, at least in Croatia.
Yeah, I mean, and I hear that when I've been here in Croatia. Like I hear that like folks here have a very strong grasp of English, and that's very incredible. And probably a lot of that owes to like television and hearing English with the Croatian subtitles. That's one thing I wish in the U.S. that we were more outward facing. So many countries I think are very good at ensuring that their citizens learn lots of languages. They're outward facing. They think about how to internationalize, and of course because the U.S. is so big and economically successful and things like that, it makes it so easy for Americans to not want to think outside themselves, to not learn other languages, or to think about larger global systems and things like that. So that is disappointing sometimes, but it's so impressive to see people in other countries who speak so many languages and have such a broader perspective at times. But yeah, I mean, for a long time, the U.S. has dominated the entertainment industry, whether it's music or television or film, and it's always been like the export of American content. But I think that's changing. I mean, certainly we still have extremely successful cultural industries in the U.S., but I think it's changing in a couple ways. One is, the rise of other sort of very competitive exporting countries as well. And so one that comes to mind is South Korea in terms of K-dramas and K-pop, and how successful those genres have been globally, across the world, including in the U.S. And that does a lot for the Korean economy, but also for people's interest in South Korea as a global partner. And they have a lot of fascinating cultural concepts that they're able to export through their media, the same way that the U.S. has for a long time. But I think the other thing that's changed, or is changing, is more collaborations across borders. And some of this is economically driven, so it may be more profitable to shoot a series in Vancouver instead of Los Angeles, or somewhere in Europe instead of in the UK or in the US. And sometimes that is just motivated by budget, but it leads to collaborations, cross-country productions. But I think also as we have a more globalized, more cooperative sort of, I guess for lack of a better phrase, like economy or cultural industries, it creates new opportunities for producers and storytellers and writers and creatives from all over the world to be part of that system, so that it's not monopolized by one language, one country, one culture, so that we can have more of a mix, and that we can have wide variety of ideas and stories.
When you said a collaboration and co-production and everything, we also here in Dubrovnik we're lucky, and a lot of my friends used to work like on a big movie productions like Game of Thrones, Star Wars, Robin Hood. All of that was shooted partly in Dubrovnik and also in other parts of Croatia, and it also gave us like a moment where we saw all of us in Dubrovnik at least saw how it can be so close. And when I'm thinking about collaborations and co-productions and everything, I also see that the world, on whatever perspective that we see, economically, politically, whatever, has never been closed, closed like in this moment, but also it's so much polarized. Can you see that like polarization of beliefs, of all the things that are happening with, I don't know, Donald Trump or some other politician and everything, and also the war in Ukraine and Russia and the Middle East and everything, I'm feeling like we never had that opportunity in a history to be a part of all the things that are happening at once in the same second that happened there, because everybody has phone, everybody has internet, satellite connection, and I'm having that feeling that we are connected as never before, but also polarized as never before.
Yeah, and I think it's very astute to connect those. So I in the past have looked at polarization as something that happens, and we can see that people like reinforce their attitudes, or especially in a country like the U.S. where you have a two-party political system, people tend to see it as like a competition, and so the two parties will try to be different from each other, and that might lead people to extreme beliefs. I've also looked at what we call affective polarization or emotional polarization. So it's maybe not that I disagree so much with the policies, but I just don't like the other people because they're my opponents. I want my team to win. I want them to lose. But I think less and less, for me, less and less I see it as polarization, as people becoming extreme or moving apart. And instead, what I see with a lot of the sort of political crises that we have now in the U.S. and across the world is it's not about polarization so much as it's about domination. And I see it as a reaction to the phenomenon that you're describing, that we're becoming more interconnected. We're becoming more appreciative of cultural differences of people. We're thinking more about ourselves as humans, as living on the same planet, and how can we care for this planet, care for each other. And I think there's a reaction to that, which is, no, I want to protect what's mine, or I don't want to know about those other people. I just want to control what I know, or I want to dominate. I want to take advantage of other people. I want to dominate other people. So, I see a lot of the political dynamics are more about, trying to put one group over another, which I think is terrible. But it's a reaction to, I think, a lot of the progress that we've made to understand each other and try to build a more peaceful and multicultural world. There's pushback against that.
Of course. We have like maybe 10 more minutes,
okay.
And I will just come back a little bit on one term that you told me before we started to shoot the podcast, and that's the doom scrolling. And
yes.
that subject is something that we all are connected also with, and we all have that motion with our finger. And let's go a little bit about that, not to just fall off the window.
Well, no, and it definitely relates to conflict and polarization and dominance and all those things. But I do think that doom scrolling is a really fascinating phenomenon. So this is a term that's been around for a few years, but people became very interested in this during the pandemic. But also things like Trump and the invasion of Ukraine and all those really activated a lot of doom scrolling, and people were talking about doom scrolling. So this was like a term that is interesting because it combines two things. One is this scrolling on social media, where it's sort of an endless scroll. Like you never get to the end of Facebook, you never get to the end of TikTok or Twitter. Like there's always more. You can always find more because there's so many voices, there's so much content. And so there is this possibility to continue looking, to keep searching. You can never find everything you can never read the whole internet. That tendency, along with people's interest in negativity, or feeling overwhelmed by negativity, feeling overwhelmed by the severity and scope of the pandemic, or the severity and the scope of different political situations. So people will keep scrolling for doom, and they'll never get enough. They keep looking for more and more negativity. So my colleagues and I, some of my former graduate students who are now professors, we thought this was really interesting. I think all three of us were doom scrollers in 2020, and so we wanted to understand this in a more sort of scientific approach. So we developed a measurement to see, is doom scrolling really something that people do, but is this also just a new name for an old habit? Like, have people been doing this for a long time? And so we were able to develop the scale, and we showed that it is a little bit different. It is a unique concept, so it's not the same thing as just being very vigilant about the online environment. It's not the same as being a news junkie or obsessed with news. It's something a little bit unique about, you know, this intersection of people's negative interests, looking for negativity, but also the endless scroll of social media. So we found that it was something that we could measure and observe, like with a survey technique. But the thing that we found that maybe is optimistic is not a lot of people do it. Like those of us, like my students and I, we were all doom scrollers, but it's not necessarily very common among the average. And we did this with a sample of adults in the OECD. So this was like a global sample. And we found that it's not that common. And actually a lot of people don't know the term. It's a term that people encounter if they read a lot of news, if they spend a lot of time on social media, they learn about doom scrolling. And they're probably also doom scrollers. But maybe the majority of the population, it's not something that they think about. They use social media in a different way, and maybe they don't have these habits. So that's good. We're not all doom scrolling. Maybe different people are at different times, depending on the particular type of crisis that they're tuning into. But it was a fascinating exercise to try to observe this.
Thank you. We had one more subject that we talk a little bit about, and that's artificial intelligence. And I think it's also connected with the doom scrolling, with all the placements in media. And we have maybe 4 to 5 minutes until the end of the podcast. So maybe just to touch a little bit of that. And I know that we can talk about all of those subjects like for hours, but we are limited with the time.
And that's a big thing we're focusing on at University of Florida. So in the university in general, but also in the college that I'm in, journalism and communications, spending a lot of time thinking about AI and how it might relate to, or how it's already changing media and communication, but also all kinds of work from medicine to engineering. But the thing that I found particularly interesting in my work with AI is when and how and with what effect do we disclose it, about transparency about using AI. So I'm looking at what happens if we use AI to write news stories, and then how do we tell people this was written by a machine, or a machine helped a human write this, they work together, and how people respond to those labels. Also ads and influencers, and what is the role of AI in all that type of content. And what we're finding so far is that AI right now, it's doing really well in terms of being able to generate high quality content. Oftentimes people can't detect the difference, or they are satisfied. This is a sufficiently interesting news story, or this ad is appealing. People like AI generated content and they think it's pretty good quality, but they do want to know. They want those disclosures. So we're finding that people do pay attention for the most part to those disclosures. Now sometimes people ignore them, but they see them, and it makes them feel like there's some transparency. So I think disclosures are really important for artificial intelligence.
Do you see some things that are dangerous?
Oh, certainly.
And because a lot also people are polarized about that. Somebody sees let's say illustrations, pictures, also some kind of music generated things, and small parts of video clips that even I also did it for a small part to test some engines, artificial. Do you see it as a big danger, or just something that we can keep in like a normal situation?
Well, I don't know. I feel both ways, I think. It depends. I mean, certainly it's a new tool. All new tools are scary at first, and we have to learn how are we actually going to use this? What are its effects going to be? How can we regulate this? And so in that way, it's the same as everything else that came before. But I think it is different because it's not maybe intelligence in the way we think about human intelligence, but it is able to generate things at a level and with a level of independence that we've never seen before. And so that raises new questions about the creation of content, or the ability to detect humanity. Is there a human behind this, or is this authentic? So it raises new questions. And then the other thing is, this technology has developed so quickly, and how much more quickly will it develop? Where will this take us? How how intelligent will AI be? And so those are questions we don't have answers to yet, but it's exciting to see this develop.
Exciting times are in front of us, and the future will bring us everything. We have finished with the time, and I just want to thank you at the end of the podcast and to wish you a good time here in Croatia. And I hope so that my English wasn't so bad. And
no, you were amazing. You were a great interviewer. I loved speaking with you today.
Thank you so much for your time and enjoy Dubrovnik and Croatia.
Thank you.
Poštovani gledatelji i slušatelji UNIDU podcasta DU-CHECK, hvala vam evo na vašemu vremenu. Mi se vidimo u idućoj emisiji. S nama je danas bio dr. Benjamin Johnson. Svakako ostanite uz naš program i evo do idućeg gledanja i slušanja.